Hey guys, guess who's back? Well, sort of. I came out of, I guess, interview retirement early uh, for one purpose, for one man and his son, JB Handley. They have a new book coming out called Underestimated. It's actually out right now. And I urge any of you guys that know a family who has a child with autism or an adult with autism, or if you yourself have a child or children with autism, this book is a game changer in our community. Honestly, I've been so moved the past year watching JB Handley's journey with his son, Jamie, who is now 17 years old. And Evan and him were diagnosed around the same time. And, you know, Jamie has not been able to communicate for all of these years, for 17 years, until a year ago when a miracle has taken place. And it's hard to use the word miracle because he's not the only one. There are many non-speakers who have found a way to communicate with their loved ones, with their educators, with the world. It's happening, it's real, and it works. It's basically a method called speaking to communicate, and they use S2C in the industry. And here's a little video to show you guys what it looks like.
Spelling to communicate helps make a connection between intent and action. All means of communication requires motor skills. Speech is really complex. It's one of the finest of the fine motors. The other complexity is the digits, and that's what we use for communication. We start by taking communication out of speech. We teach the purposeful movement of using the whole arm, taking it out of fine motor, putting it in gross motor, to be able to point to letters on an increasingly complex series of letter boards to keyboards. And that's how we give them a vehicle to express their thoughts and ideas.
The book is called Underestimated, and it's co-authored by JB Handley and Jamie Handley, and they're here to talk about it. Hi, guys.
My main man wanted to sit right here.
Jamie, I am so excited for this moment. You have no idea.
All right, go ahead. J, and hi, Jenny. I, L, O, go ahead. B, E, go ahead. Y, O, U. He said, hi, Jenny, I love you.
Already. Jamie, I love you too. I love you so much. And I'm so honored that I get to be in your life, that I get to be your friend, that we can communicate with each other. And most of all, thank you so much, Jamie, for helping so many kids, young adults, people, parents, you name it, because you've helped so many. I have chills all over my body. I'm freaking out right now. I feel like I'm in the midst of a celebrity right now.
H, A, N, K, Y, O, U. He says, thank you. So I do have the board with me, but he only wants to communicate on this, which is attached to this. So this is his app, but I mean, look at how much he types. This is just like a few days. That's how prolific he has become on the keyboard. And he prefers the keyboard. I mean, we're moving towards it being fixed and therefore independent, right?
Right. Having his own voice.
Yeah. So right now I hold it like that, right? But I can literally get it almost to like where it's like sitting on the table, you know?
Wow.
And he's still doing it. And so we're working through that transition, right, to independence, which, like, it's not necessarily possible for every kid because of the scale of their motor deficit, but it's definitely possible for Jamie.
Just to let people catch up here. So we've known each other a long time. JB is created basically the founder of Generation Rescue. And that is how I found all the biomedical treatment, the doctors, the scientists, you name it, for Evan. And so we've been on this journey together for a very, very long time. Jamie, we've called what, non-speakers? Is that the term?
A non-speaker with autism.
Non-speaker with autism. And you haven't been able to communicate with him for this up until last year, correct?
For the first 17 years of his life. I mean, certainly we communicated, but that was really sort of to get basic needs met and get around the house. And there's a lot of ways to communicate, right? But nothing compared to what we're doing now.
And the amount of biomedical treatment that I think that you've done, you were a parent that stepped up and never stopped trying, never stopped looking.
You know, it's weird that this is like controversial. Right. And what I would say is that Jamie was physically sick. And so we tried to address his physical sickness medically. Right. And we always have. And many of the things we did helped a little, right? Incremental help. On the scale, Jamie is very regulated, which basically means that he can sit in a chair for an extended period of time. We attribute that to all the biomed we did, and we tend to run into other biomed parents who have kids who are pretty regulated as well.
Right.
Can't prove that in a scientific paper. But yes, at the end of the day, from the day Jamie was diagnosed and he had all these what they call comorbidities, all these things about his body that were out of whack, we've tried to address those with the help of really well-intended, really smart doctors. And it definitely benefited him. But what we never got back was speech.
Right.
And, you know, I've now come to sort of realize there's this whole group of parents where for whatever reason, whatever cause, it really doesn't matter, their motor was way out of whack. The fine motor and the ability to plan the motor of certain children is really, really compromised. And when it's compromised, you can't talk, because speech is fine motor exemplified. Moving your eyes is fine motor exemplified. Your little digits and moving your fingers is fine motor. And I don't mean to jump right into it, but really the major insight of what's happened with Jamie in the last year, which I think can be extrapolated to every single non-speaking kid with autism. With Jenny, it's 40 to 50% of the total in ASD. I mean, you're talking 3 to 5 million children. This is not some minority, some tiny minority. I think their major disability is a motor disability, not a cognitive disability at all, but a motor planning disability. And it didn't take me that many words to explain that, but that is like the most radical thought that's been presented. It turns
so long though, JV. What took us so long?
I think that the disability is really nasty in the sense that if you observe these children with your own frame of reference for what intelligence should look like and how children should respond, you can quickly decide that these kids are not intelligent. And then you go down that path of trying to behave accordingly. I'm going to give you a great example. And this is a topic that I did not even understand until Jamie taught it to me along with some amazing therapists. But the idea of initiation, the very act of initiating something you want to do, is absolutely impaired with this group of kids. So let me illustrate that for you. 3 objects sitting in front of Jamie. He's got an OT on a computer who asks me to basically hold up a letterboard so that Jamie can communicate. And Jamie spells, and like the objects are like a pair of glasses, some scotch tape, and an iPod. And Jamie spells, I will pick up the scotch tape, right? And then my job is to do nothing, not to say anything. And Jamie can sit there for a minute and do nothing. Even after already spelling to me, I will pick up the scotch tape. And then he slowly has learned how to pick up the scotch tape. And what he's explained to me is, I can't get my body to do what my mind wants it to. So that entire minute, Dad, when you were watching me, waiting for me to pick up the scotch tape, I was trying to pick it up, but I couldn't make my body do that, okay? Imagine how many ways a disability of initiation due to the inability to get your body to do what you wanted it to do could be misinterpreted.
Right, right.
It really, you can see the consequential downstream impact of that. And what's been really interesting with Jamie working through this initiation with proper therapy is, number one, he's improving. Okay, so now when he does that, he can pick up the object right away. And we've seen that carry over into other aspects of his life where he's able to initiate things he wants, like picking up the letterboard to ask Dad to communicate with him, right? And so you can imagine even the most well-intended therapist viewing these children through their own lens would reach conclusions about them that are wholly false. I think that's one of the reasons this has been so sorely missed by so many, even the most well-intended.
And I get that, but I don't understand the controversy behind it. And it's when you hold up this letterboard, and there's multiple stories of this of kids, adults breaking through like Jamie. Where is the controversy? Why is it even there?
Okay, so there's the nefarious side of the controversy, and there's the understandable side of the controversy. The well-intended people worry because this board is held by someone else, and the child literally points. I mean, they literally point and spell, and the person calls out the letters. There are people who worry that it's effectively a Ouija board, that the communication partner is somehow, even though they're not touching and they don't touch the other person, is somehow signaling through slight movement or whatever it might be to the speller what they want to hear. Okay, and so they're saying this is not okay because it's not really their words, and so that's the argument. Okay, it's not a coincidence that most of these haters are the people who are involved in what's known as ABA, which is today, it's kind of the autism industrial complex. It's the mainstream therapy for these kids. It's the one that insurance covers. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it goes in a completely different direction. It presumes, so spelling to communicate, which is what Jamie uses to communicate now, presumes competence in every child. Said differently, spelling to communicate practitioners presume that every child is highly intelligent, okay? ABA presumes incompetence, and that basically the behavior of these children needs to be modified, right? They need to look, act, talk like us to the best degree possible. And so this really flies in the face of that. So that's the more nefarious and profit-oriented side of doubters. And proving the doubters wrong is so easy, it's almost frustrating that it even comes up, but it does. Because what's true for a portion of the children who start out on this letterboard is that they move to a keyboard, and then the keyboard over time becomes fixed, meaning it sits in place, and that interaction with the communication partner is no longer there. And there are plenty of these children in the world, and they say, yes, the letterboard was like the training wheels that got me to this. Right. And I say to the doubters, how many of those kids do we need? Like, I'm good with one.
Totally. Right? Exactly. And once he's able to communicate without a facilitator, didn't he just scientifically prove everyone wrong?
It does, and they exist. Jamie isn't one of them today, and they don't all get to that point because for some, the motor deficit is too extreme, right? Going from this to this is a lot of fine motor that is the very source of the disability. Jamie's only been able to get there over a 14-month period with a ton of effort and work because it's much harder.
That's still fast.
So I want to be clear, they don't all make it to that point, and that's not a bad thing. But like you just agreed, like you only need one to prove all the doubters wrong, and there's well more than one. There's dozens, if not hundreds, who are on fixed keyboards who started on letterboards who will explain that the letterboard was the training wheels they needed to get there.
Right.
And so at that point, to me, the controversy is over. There's also a study out of UVA that was published about a year ago where they put like these eye tracking glasses on the kids, and they watched how quickly they went from letter to letter on the board. And, you know, scientists at UVA, peer-reviewed study, and what they found was that the pointing to the letters was being done by the kids, not by anybody else. And it's the first published study that validates what any parent knows. And, you know, I mean, Jamie has spelled things for other teachers that they could have never known about him. How many of those do you need?
Right. I mean, and again, everyone, you have to get the book, Underestimated, an Autism Miracle, because you get to hear Jamie speak for himself, what he has to say about everything. Jamie, with all the parents that are watching, because I obviously, you know, that we've both been involved in this community for so long, and I've heard from parents that have older kids, I'm tired, hope is exhausting, after defeat after defeat, I don't know if I can try anymore. How did you keep going? How did you not give up? And what kind of advice do you have for parents to at least give this a try?
So I got a random text from Honey Renicella, who is a active autism mom in Philadelphia. And she has a son named Vince, who's just a little bit older than Jamie. And I knew Vince, and I knew of Vince, and I knew he was a non-speaker and that he had a lot of similarities to Jamie. And it's in the book what she texted me, but she started texting me these very complex passages that Vince had spelled on a letterboard. Very complex thinking, the thinking of like a higher order thinker, like a sophisticated, intelligent person. And she said, these are written by Vince. And, you know, as you can imagine, that was, I think I used the analogy in the book. It would be like your heavily overweight 50-year-old friend sending you a video of them dunking like Michael Jordan. Like, it doesn't reconcile. It doesn't make sense what you're telling me. And I certainly believed her that this was being written by Vince, but I was certain that there must be something about Vince that was very, very special, that someone had missed or something. I wanted to believe that, okay, he's just a really unique kid and they happened upon this therapy. And so what happened was I was out when she sent me the text. I was literally at my daughter's basketball practice, and I went home and I sent her a video of Jamie. Like in that moment, I just literally videoed him. And my point was to say, like, look, this is Jamie. Like, you're trying to tell me that he can do this, you know, like he has autism and he doesn't speak and everything else. And she typed back, oh my God, he's doing so much better than Vince. I know he's in there. He can do this. And I mean, I was like, what? Like that probably shook me out of my stupor a little bit. And then she sent me video of Vince, and Vince is a wonderful kid. And he's a non-speaker and he has autism. And it was her at dinner helping him eat his meal. And he had mannerisms and he was stimming and he's doing all the things that we sort of attribute with autism. And she's like, this is Vince. This is the guy cranking out those beautiful words on the letterboard. And, you know, 3 months ago, we thought I Want Juice was the peak of his cognition. And now we know that he's this amazing, wonderful guy. And so, you know, in that moment, I guess I was sort of forced with a decision, right? To believe Honey. And I would describe it as, in that moment, and this is like why this book exists in a lot of ways, Honey was bridging hope for my family. She was bridging hope when we didn't really have it, right? She was letting us know, no, Jamie can do this. I can see it in him. And she did. She bridged just enough hope for me to get on the phone the next day. And I called this place called Growing Kids Therapy Center in Herndon, Virginia, where Elizabeth Vossler, who is the innovator of Spelling to Communicate, works. And they have this out-of-town visit deal. And this is going to sound ridiculous. You go for 2 days and 4 hours, right? I'm like, okay. And it was right before Christmas, and my parents happen to live out there. And I'm like, okay, we can fly. And I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this. Honey bridged just enough hope for me to like dial that phone call. And we all know how scary hope can be because it's really like a drug.
Yep.
And so literally like a week later, Jamie and I got on an airplane and we flew to Growing Kids Therapy Center, and the most insane and profound and crazy and beautiful thing happened. So first of all, we've been told, like, when you go to this place, they're going to talk to Jamie like he's a normal, intelligent person, and you're kind of going to be in the background. And that's how they treat all the children. And I was like, well, that's a beautiful thing, right? Like, I can wrap my head around that. And so we go in there, and it's exactly how it would have been portrayed to me. They literally go right up to Jamie. They talk to him in a normal cadence. None of this like, hello, Jamie, you know, none of that. Normal, like he's any other intelligent being. And we go into our first session, and I sit in the back of the room, and Elizabeth Vossler, the amazing woman who started all this, is literally sitting there with Jamie. And we have this all on videotape, so I was able to, in the book, I give word for word of this experience. But basically, Elizabeth turned to Jamie, and she said, Jamie, I know how smart you are.
Oh.
And what's crazy, because he's 17 at this moment, is that no one had ever said that to him in that way, with such firm belief. And then she went on to explain to him, and I know it's been really frustrating, because you haven't been able to tell anyone. You've been sitting on this big secret. But I have a way for you where I can help you start to let people know how smart you are. You can imagine, like, I'm sitting in the back of the room and I'm absolutely, I mean, I'm trying to hold it in because I don't want to be a distraction, but I just have tears like firing out of the sides of my eyes.
Of course you do.
I mean, it touches me just to think about what she said. And I asked Jamie later, he's sitting right next to me, as you know. I asked Jamie later, how did you feel when Elizabeth said that to you? And Jamie said, I thought, how does she know? How did she know? She's the first person who knows. It's like he's been sitting on this secret literally his whole life. And this woman knew. And he instantly trusted her and loved her. She is a very warm and compassionate and heart-centered human being, as you can imagine.
Of course.
Elizabeth would have to be. And so she basically introduced to Jamie, again, talking to him like the smart, amazing guy that he is. She basically introduced this idea, which is radical, but so simple. She explained to Jamie, your fine motor is impaired. It makes it very hard for you to do the things that people want you to do, like speak and type and touch on an iPad and all this. But I'm going to teach you to do something that's really simple, where you really use your shoulder, your gross motor, right? Because pointing is actually a gross motor motion. Yes, your finger's involved, but it's not doing this.
Right.
It's just sort of held in place and all the movement's coming from here. She said, I'm going to teach you to use your gross motor, which does not inhibit your ability to think, process, and bring those thoughts out. And it's going to be a way that you can communicate. And she even goes through like this whole neurological explanation of where fine motor sits on the brain. And what you hear a lot of people like Jamie say is that when my fine motor is really, really taxed, it's really hard to get my thoughts out. I just, like, you can teach me to type, but I just can't do both. It's like too hard. Excuse me, but this gross motor, as it's taught over time, it's a lot easier. And they don't start with this board, Jenny. They start with a stencil board that just has 8 letters on it. And they're poking with a pencil at first. Like now Jamie points with his finger, but they're poking with a pencil. And what's important for parents to understand is this is not a cognitive thing. The spelling to communicate practitioners explain that's already fully intact. This is just developing a motor relationship, a myelinated pathway that does not presently exist between your thoughts and your body. The analogies that I like best are, it's like teaching someone a golf swing for the first time, where they just have to do it over and over again until they get the motor memory.
Right.
Or a stroke victim, where they lose the pathway in part of their brain, and so they go find a different part of the brain and redo the pathway there. That's really the analogy. And in Jamie's case, and this isn't going to be true for every kid, by the second day, he was spelling fine. Like Iroquois. Like sophisticated words that I couldn't necessarily spell. And Jamie is ripping them out on the letterboard.
Yeah.
And then Jamie,
in the book, when I was reading it, and I was like, oh my God, he spells better than me. He's so intellectual and funny and like you said, almost like a Buddha, but there is a genius sitting in there.
Yes, there is. You know, it's interesting, Jenny. I'm going to explain something to you because, like, I've had 14 months of Jamie being fluent, which means that he can spell all his thoughts on a board now. The other word people use for that is open, meaning he can communicate openly about his own opinions and thoughts, not just do kind of like rote words that he's asked to spell.
Right. Complex.
I've been 14 months with my son, and I've been able to ask him anything, and he's sitting here next to me, being very patient. And Jamie will do this thing where he'll say these words that don't have any meaning to me, and he wants me to, he's kind of waits for me to say them back to him, like he just said to me, "Supu." Well, that's not really a word. And he's done this for a long time. And we found that if we repeat it, he sort of seems satisfied and goes on about his day.
Which most of kids, parents who have kids with autism know that,
Yeah. So I asked Jamie, because I can, Jamie, what are you doing when you, like, what does all that mean? And Jamie said, it means you repeat it to me and I know you love me.
Oh, I just melted in my chair. Oh my God, Jamie. Oh, Jamie, can I ask him a question?
Yeah. So here's my man. We're in Hawaii, if you wonder why the look is the way it is.
Looks
And
so
I just want to be really clear about this for the benefit of parents. So we started out on an 8-letter stencil, which is just, there's a whole methodology to spelling to communicate. I think it's really important to follow that methodology by the letter, because they've taken many years to figure out kind of what, and they talk about this seesaw between motor planning and cognition, and you want to just move up and up. This is like the graduate board, because Jamie can just point and crank. And then now he's like getting his PhD because he's moved to this keyboard. Okay. Are you still there?
I am. It does take a lot of effort. It's not.
I just want to be clear with parents, like it's hundreds of hours. Okay. Right. This has not been an overnight thing. And I don't want people to be discouraged. They're like, oh, well, my kid didn't do that on the first day. Well, they're not going to. It's going to take some time.
It is going to take, like anything, it takes some time. But I do, while it's in my head, JB, I have to ask you, because there's some parents that are going to say, great, how much is this going to cost me? Is this just for rich people? Is it expensive?
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. Having Jamie become open on the letterboard is the most incredible, life-changing, joy-filling experience, mostly for Jamie, who says he's never been so happy, and he's incredibly regulated and calm and mellow. But I mean, for our whole family, it's turned our entire family's life upside down in the best possible way. And in our case, by the time he got open, we'd spent less than $2,000 on lessons. I mean, a trained spelling to communicate practitioner costs somewhere between $100 and $200 an hour.
Wow.
I mean, compared to all the other things.
I was going to say, considering how much we've spent, us parents spent over the years, that's nothing.
It's really nothing. So, all right. So Jamie has a keyboard.
Okay.
And he has an iPad, right? And it has this app called Proloquo for Text, which is PROLLQUO 4TEXT. And what it does is, as he spells on the keyboard, which by the way, he uses the space bar and he uses the delete key himself. He's learned how to do that.
That's amazing.
He'll spell out a sentence, and then when he hits return, it says it for him. And he picked a British voice because he said it sounds like James Bond.
Oh my God, I love that.
So we went through like 10 voices, and I'm gonna have Jamie take off his sunglasses just so you can see like how much engagement there is with him. Kind of like, sorry, I'm just going back and forth between the keyboard and the iPad because he likes to see exactly what he's spelling. So Jage, will you take your shades off? Thanks. So Jenny, if you'd like to ask him a question, he's good to go.
I would love to. By the way, Jamie, I just want to let you know, I love your taste in old school hip hop. It is amazing.
Now I can answer you.
I wore this sweatshirt just for you.
Hang on, Jenny.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You can do it. Yep. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jenny.
So he said, "Thank you, Jenny."
Thank you. Oh my God, I'm gonna try to not get.
Hang on, he's still going.
I know. I'm gonna. No.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I love your sweatshirt.
Oh my God. Thanks, Jamie. I'll have to get you one so we can have matching. I love
you can see his eyes, right, going back and forth.
Totally.
I mean, here's the keyboard, and then he wrote, "Thank you, Jenny. I love your sweatshirt." I mean,
it's him. By the way, audience who's listening, I've been lucky enough to watch JB and Jamie on this journey because JB would share the videos with me along the way, which I've cried many times, like JB and any parent that's gone through this. And to witness it just off the sideline has been amazing. That's why I'm so grateful they both wrote this book. Again, it's called Underestimated, an Autism Miracle. You have to pick it up. Jamie, let me continue with some questions for you. A lot of people are going to read your book and think, oh, that's great for, Jamie and JB's family, but can it really happen to my non-speaker of a son or a daughter? Do you think that there's that the majority of non-speakers are like you?
I think they all are.
Oh my gosh, I have the chills all over my body. It's amazing and exciting and also terrifying at the same time. And you know what I mean by that.
It's I don't mean to cut he's the much more interesting member of this show, but so when I was with Elizabeth Vossler those first couple days, I was sort of internalizing the ramifications of this. And I asked her, I said, so, I mean, have you had kids come here who have the autism label and they're non-speakers, but they truly are cognitively disabled? Now, in retrospect, I know what a naive question that was, but at the time I was really pondering this, and her answer was really simple. She said, not yet.
You're kidding. And how many years that she's been doing this?
I mean, 7, 8. I mean, she tells me there's somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 kids who are fluent on letterboards right now. They're like this silent little world of super happy families loving their lives. And it's interesting, even as stuff has been posted on social media, I'll get these random posts from people who will say, yeah, my, child discovered this 3 years ago, had the exact same thing happen to us. Now life is amazing and they're off to college or whatever it is. Like, it's happening quietly behind the scenes. And, for whatever reason, it just hasn't had a profile.
Until I came across Jamie Handley.
Well, this guy is the one who decided to write the book. I was happy to kind of head off into the sunset. And for all the stress that autism had caused our family and had really caused Jamie, this was such a gift. And to be honest with you, like, after this book is done, I am heading off into the sunset, because living in the outer world is tiring, as you well know.
Yes.
And there's so much that Jamie wants to do. And spending time with him, helping him reach his goals, is the best and most fun way I could possibly spend my day and life. And sharing this story with the world is like a one-time thing, right? Because I think that Jamie, well, I mean, I'm going to ask him because I think it's a great question. Jamie, why did you push to write this book? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Yep.
I need parents to know.
Did you catch that? He said, I need parents to know. And I think something that Jamie picked up on early is that the non-speakers can't be helped without their parents.
Right. And let me ask, can I do a follow-up with Jamie, which is,
yeah,
Jamie,
of course.
what can parents do better?
Go ahead and put your feet down. Mm-hmm. You got it. You got it. Go ahead. There you go. Sorry. Sometimes I reset because his eyes are getting a little tired, or he just misspelled something and hit the delete key, which is awesome. He can do his own corrections.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm. 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 Go ahead.
Treat us like we're smart.
So Jamie spelled treat us like we're smart. And I want to give a little bit of perspective on just that statement alone. So spelling to communicate embraces this mantra of the presumption of competence. Okay. And the presumption of competence basically just means treat the non-speakers like the hyper-intelligent beings that they are, versus presuming incompetence, which is the way that most ABA therapy is done. And early on at Jamie's autism school, once we realized how intelligent Jamie was and he was starting to become fluent on the letterboard, Jamie had been relegated to a life skills class, which is where most non-speakers end up. And if you think about this, this is actually a really punitive form of ableism, where because of their inability to communicate, they're judged to be unintelligent. And then they're kind of given the time to learn how to fold laundry and do things like that, versus being taught about physics and the world and everything else. And so we, as you can imagine, were relatively loud advocates within Jamie's all autism school for the fact that the non-speakers were being taught wrong, okay? And our point was that even before one more of them becomes fluent on the letterboard, can we please change the curriculum to age appropriate everything? Because, you know, part of learning is just sitting there and listening, right? It's not just, you know, you can just sit in a room and hear a lecture and learn something. And, you know, how many times do they need to read like Clifford the Big Red Dog when you could be teaching them about astrophysics?
That's
and
right.
So our first point, and many of the Spelling to Communicate parents who I interacted with on our journey would say, well, yeah, the day that I realized this, I just started reading them like complex books about complex topics, and they would just sit and listen.
And
right?
Like this.
Well, yeah, obviously, like they understand it all. And so the first giant leap with Jamie's school was, you just need to change the curriculum like 100% and just start giving them the same topics that the smartest kids in the school are getting over in that high academic classroom, and just presume competence. And as Elizabeth Vosser says, like on your deathbed, would you rather have underestimated or overestimated these children?
Exactly.
You know, at the end of the day, why not?
That's right.
What's the harm? And when you have Jamie saying, yeah, I want to learn all this stuff, and you know, his friends are slowly getting up this curve on the letterboard, and so more and more of these kids are in Jamie's school. But I want to highlight some of the amazing things that went on, even in a very well-intended school. The people who have a BCBA next to their name, which are the ABA experts, if you will, in the school, there was a revolt when we asked to have Jamie come into the school with a letterboard and a communication partner, and they all threatened to quit the school.
That is unbelievable and sad and scary. And why is that? Money?
I'll explain. So they didn't just threaten to quit, but the BCBA still refused to be in a classroom with Jamie to this moment, to this day. There was a class that Jamie wanted to take, and it was being taught by a BCBA. And the head of the school, who was on our side, went to the BCBA and said, Jamie would like to take this class. And he said, I cannot be in the classroom with Jamie. And so she removed him from teaching the class and got a different teacher, right? So she found a way around it, but it's a pretty unconscionable thing, and it's really hard for people to wrap their head around. And we're living it even now as we speak. And I know that you're like incredulous and sputtering with anger and confusion. And the reason is that the governing bodies of these places don't recognize letterboarding as a viable communication method. And so they forbid their certified practitioners from being involved with it.
Oh my God. But if enough of these practitioners speak up and say, hey, you know what, we should look into this, then they can, correct?
I think it will probably take, I mean, we have published science now, just the beginnings of it. It will probably take lawsuits, I would guess, for this to go into court and be deemed viable. And that's where you'll have witnesses who are independent spellers who can talk about their, you know, transition and whatever else. It's ultimately money. I think that ABA is a broken system for working with kids with autism. It may have some benefits to some children at some stages. I don't want to say that it doesn't. But, you know, I'm just going to ask Jamie what he thought of the ABA when it was done with him.
Yes.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Yep, you got it. Go ahead.
It was awful.
He said it was awful.
Oh.
This is a common thing that I hear from spellers, you know, non-speakers, because
it was awful.
Oh, you want to say more? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. You got it. Yep. Find it.
People who do their name.
That's hard to hear because the voice didn't handle ABA well. People who do ABA are mean. Now look, I don't want to generalize like that and throw every well-intended professional under the bus. Jamie's speaking from his own experience. And I think when you witness, if you walk into an ABA scene and you believe what I believe, that these children are hyper intelligent and just struggling with their motor and struggling with their ability to control their body, and then you watch an ABA session, I think it will break the average person's heart, because it's kind of like dog training. It's very behaviorally oriented, and it's really trying to get the kids to look and move like normal, whatever that means. And the kids who speak on the letterboards pretty much universally disdain ABA. And I think something that's really hard for people to wrap their head around is, like, a child like Jamie can be doing 5 different things with his body and not looking at you and even making noises, and they are listening to every single word.
That's right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so they don't need to do eyes on.
No,
They don't need to pay attention. There are BCBAs who have quietly jumped on board with S2C.
Good.
They do so with some risk to their own certification, which means that the board that runs this stuff is ultimately responsible. ASHA, which is the American Speech Language Hearing Association, they put out a statement that basically repudiated S2C and said, don't teach it. And so a lot of SLPs, speech language pathologists, will also avoid kids like Jamie because of that statement. And so, I mean, these people are crazy. Like, they literally need to have their heads examined. Like, the most challenging population of children in the entire profession have found a way to communicate and are proving to be brilliant. And they're sitting on the sidelines with their arms folded. It's embarrassing. It's professionally embarrassing to these people. If they got in a room with 100 spellers, including some number who were on fixed keyboards, I mean, their heads would probably explode with embarrassment and shame for what they're doing to hinder the adoption of this on a broad scale. So, we'll do our small part to kind of poke that and encourage people to open their minds. Even within Jamie's school, we're kind of like a microcosm, right? So you have the hardcore BCBAs who have their arms folded, who have never been willing to engage with Jamie. And I find their behavior to be embarrassing and pathetic. But it's not our fight. Like, we're not going to like spend our time trying to prove to them something. At the same time, probably half the teachers in the school recognize this for the incredible miracle that it is. And there's one teacher who teaches the highest academic class in the school, and she's not a BCBA. And from the first day, she took Jamie in. Okay. And so he's actually getting schooling at the highest academic level in the entire school, with a bunch of speakers in the room. And this wonderful teacher who has even begun to learn how to do S2C for herself. She's doing spelling lessons with Jamie to teach herself this amazing miracle.
Wow.
And one of the interesting things that was happening, Jamie was having some behavioral issues when he was in the life skills class. As you can imagine, you might too. If everybody was treating you like you were dumb and asking you to sort beads for the 50th time in a row. And they all who were BCBAs, they all warned this teacher, oh, okay, you're going to take Jamie on. Well, guess what? You're going to have some behavioral issues. Good luck with that. Kind of like cynical and negative. And guess what? It's been over a year. Jamie's been in school the whole time. He's never had to leave school because of autism. He was outside of the whole quarantine. So we had summer school and we've been in school all fall. We haven't had a single issue.
Wow.
And as the Spelling to Communicate people explain, that's what's known as top-down regulation, which is fancy language for you're not going crazy anymore.
Right, exactly. I would be calm too.
Crazy?
Jamie, I want to ask you a question. I know we're keeping you a long time, but I swear we're almost done. What is your dream? What haven't you done yet that you would like to go and do, or career-wise?
Go ahead. Go ahead. You got it. Sorry.
I want to go to college.
And you will go to college.
So this is very common amongst the non-speakers who become fluent on the letterboard. I think to a person, they are highly, highly intelligent. I don't know why exactly. I don't know if the denial of one way to communicate fostered remarkable brain development. I don't know why. I just know that they are. And they all profess a desire to go to college. And importantly, many of them already have. There are letterboarders in college across the country right now, not in massive numbers, but like California Lutheran University holds a weekend seminar on non-speakers going to college with letterboards. Like Jamie has participated
Amazing.
in this amazing event.
He's excited.
And there was one there was one non-speaker who did a whole video about her day in college with her communication partner, the whole thing. So I mean, Jamie is not the pioneer here. I want to be really clear about that. There are hundreds, I mean thousands who've come before him and who are out, advocating, excuse me, in the colleges and making this happen. So Jamie's dream is highly realistic, and it's certainly our goal now. He's going to finish high school with a normal degree. He's catching up. Like, we're actually working on finishing his math proficiencies right now, because it turns out he's very advanced in math. Here. Why don't you ask Jamie another question? He's getting ready to go hang out in the yard.
Let me ask
you. Know what? I'm gonna I'll chime in because he told me something
to go to college.
Tell Jenny where you want to be. Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yep. Go ahead. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep, you got it. You're doing great. Go ahead. You're going to like this sentence. Go ahead. You're doing great.
I've loved them all. Keep my mascara from running.
You got it. Got it. So let's reset. Go. Mm-hmm.
I want to be in Hawaii as head of neuroscience for University of Hawaii.
Oh, can I go too? Can I join you, Jamie?
Okay, buddy.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I love you.
So yeah, I want to be in Hawaii as head of neuroscience for University of Hawaii. So
unbelievable.
We are in Hawaii, and it is like his favorite place on earth. I just think that the wind and the waves, and I mean, who doesn't?
And the spiritual vibration
emanating from the earth.
I gotta say, because like, I know you called him your Buddha, and I've called Evan that before too, but these kids, these young adults, I should say, do have this kind of higher frequency, this vibration that they run on. And it's fascinating to me, but it would make sense when you're not plugged into this crazy world that we're in, watching the news and social media, that they actually have the time to go, that's all they have is to go inward. And
something I haven't really talked about, but a lot of these non-speakers, because of the motor disability, they have what's known as ocular apraxia, which I'd never heard of. And what ocular apraxia is basically they can't get their eyes to go where they want them to go. So if I give Jamie like just a basic, like follow the pen, right? He'll try really hard, but his eyes will be bouncing away like all the time. Like he's like, I cannot get my eyes to do what I want them to do. And with all the non-speakers in his class, when they've gone into working on spelling to communicate, they've all had it in various ways, this ocular apraxia. And so imagine trying to find letters on a letterboard when you can't get your eyes to go where you want them to go. And imagine how people would mistake that for unintelligence.
Of course, exactly.
So the fact that we don't broadly understand that non-speakers often suffer from ocular apraxia is just one more example of how limited we really do understand this. And in spelling to communicate world, this is perfectly understood. And it's one of the biggest challenges to getting them on the board. And it's why it takes so much time, because they have to learn and kind of remyelinate this ability to move their eyes properly. And so Jamie can't read a book. He can read 20-point font on a giant page, no problem. And I found out he's totally literate. He just needed the book to be bigger because the little print bounces around and his eyes can't handle it. And that's why he doesn't have a phone, and that's why he never goes on a computer, because it's just too noisy and hard for his eyes to see it all. So he just doesn't even bother.
I mean, I'm having such aha moments right now. Is this also, JB, when we see him on the video, and I'm glad that you were able to see his eyes, because you do see them move away and come back.
Well, okay, so no, because he's had a year and he's had 14 months of training. He's going back and forth between the keyboard and the iPad. He's making sure that what he spelled is what's on the iPad. So you can't see, but he's literally like, so I have the keyboard here and the iPad is right behind the keyboard. So he's going like this. Look at the keyboard, look at the iPad, look at the keyboard. Wow. And then he's hitting delete when he spells something wrong. And so he's being very fastidious about his writing. So that's what you were seeing with his eyes.
Okay.
Yeah, but remember, and he can motor on this thing at like really fast, but this is 14 months of intense training. I just want to like remind parents, like, it didn't happen that way overnight. And his eyes have been like again, remember the stroke victim, things have been remyelinated to work better based on no different than someone relearning to walk when they can't after a stroke. Like, he's gone through a ton to get to this point. So now his ocular apraxia is much lower and less challenging for him than it used to be.
Okay, so that can be improved as well, is what you're saying.
It can be dramatically improved through therapy, yeah. Oh. Yeah, everything can be improved because the brain is neuroplastic. You can myelinate motor pathways that did not previously exist or got blown out for whatever reason. I don't know, but they can be remyelinated. Our brain has that capacity. And so these, just as Jamie can, like through initiation therapy, he's starting to initiate more because he can think a thought and get his body to do it in a way that maybe he couldn't a year ago. And so between extreme fine motor impairment, the inability to articulate and get words through the mouth, keyboard stuff being very difficult, the eyes being really hard, all of them going back to this kind of simple premise of, motor disability, motor planning disability, you start to realize how many ways we got this wrong and why.
Right.
Because we looked at these kids through our lens of normalcy, they didn't meet it, and we immediately went to, oh, they're not intelligent.
I know, the shame. We didn't know, right? We didn't know.
It's been a reckoning for my wife and I. There's been a lot of apologies to Jamie, a lot of guilt. These kids are the most forgiving and the kindest when it comes to that particular issue, because every parent feels that way. And if you said something in front of them where you weren't, you didn't know that they could understand you. I mean, this is heavy stuff. And we've been through a lot of that with Jamie, and he's had some very emotional days, reconciling all those lonely years, right? That's a lot of pain, we're on our way to letting him have his own therapist. It's tricky because you're in the room with them. So they, but like that's on the agenda to do. The teachers who treated him like he was stupid, like we know who they are.
Oh, wow. That's hard. That's hard.
Brutal. The list of injustices that he's shared with us, things said to him, like we have it all, right? We didn't have it before because, I think 99% of teachers who work with kids with autism are well-intended, but there's the occasional who kind of isn't, or lets things slip and doesn't worry about it or doesn't have that sensitivity. And we know who those teachers are,
exactly.
And I've heard this from other parents at other schools like this. And so it turns everything on its head.
It sure does, doesn't it? JP, I am so blown away by you and by Jamie. I'm so excited for the day too, where I get to just email him without you knowing what I'm asking him or talking about.
Totally. You know what Jamie said? He has this wonderful communication partner who goes to school with him. See, I could do it, and I did it in summer school. And Jamie was like, I don't want you to come to school with me anymore because you're my dad, right? Like, he's a teenager.
Totally.
Like, so we have trained a communication partner who goes to school with Jamie where he spells with her. and interaction of the day. And when he started working on the keyboard and kind of the light bulb went off, like, oh, I can be independent with this keyboard. Jamie was like, I don't think we're going to be needing my communication partner much longer.
Good for him.
And he said now, I want to be independent by summer. Wow. He's been very clear on his time frame. Who knows? But I mean, we're going to try, right? We're moving towards that, and there's a bunch of methods involved in kind of taking the communication partner out, because the communication partner does provide some regulation and some like sort of support at a very fundamental level. And he'll acknowledge that he's more calm, but he wants to learn how to do it by himself. So, you know, who doubts him at this point, right?
No one's going to underestimate him. Let me tell you,
Yeah.
Jamie, it won't be his last book, I will say. Maybe not yours either. You keep trying to get out, but you keep getting sucked right back in. And
I know.
You are a guardian angel. He is a Buddha, and I can't thank you enough. I love you. I love Jamie. And hopefully everyone watching this, please pick up the book, Underestimated, an Autism Miracle. If you know someone on the spectrum, please buy it, send it to them, have an open mind, look into it. Don't just all of a sudden just go, it's not for me. I promise you, JB is the real deal. He's not going to come out of hiding for anything that wouldn't work at this point. And I'm just grateful to you, and I love you, and I can't wait to see what happens next, because you guys just keep blowing me away.
Well, we really appreciate all your love and support. Off camera, Jenny, you are one of our best friends. You love our family. It's been great to be able to share this whole journey with you. And so thank you. I appreciate you getting the word out.